Watch how tensions explode in the Commons as a week of crisis, anger and political pressure reaches boiling point. From economic shocks linked to global conflict to devastating failures exposed in the Southport inquiry and a growing scandal surrounding Peter Mandelson, this is a moment that's shaking trust at the very top. For many watching, it's not just politics, it's about safety, leadership, and whether those in power are truly in control. The stakes couldn't be higher and emotions are running high across Parliament. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Let's watch this explosive clip.
The impact of Iran's behaviour in the Strait is causing untold economic damage. It's visible on every petrol forecourt in the country. My guide from the start of this conflict has always been our national interest. That's why we stayed out of the war and why we continue to stay out of the war. And that is why we are working now to restore freedom of navigation in the Middle East, because that is squarely in our national interest.
Britain must focus on what is in our power to protect British citizens today. First, we must rapidly solve the energy crisis this war has caused in our country. And second, we must make sure that Britain is ready to defend herself in this new age. To be ready, Britain must be able to defend herself. And that means we must be ready for these situations before they happen. France and Greece, they are I don't know why they're laughing. I'm surprised they're laughing, because last time I checked, France and Greece sent ships to protect our bases in Cyprus while our destroyer was stuck in Portsmouth. It was a national embarrassment on their shoulders, and it should never happen again. When exactly will the Defence Investment Plan be published, and what action is he taking to find the money to pay for it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I noticed that her opening sentence has changed. She used to say, we didn't start the war, but like it or not, we're in it. And we should be in it. That was her position. Now she says, well, they can't make their mind up. They supported the war without thinking through the consequences, and now they're pretending they didn't support the war and they're against it all along.
We heard evidence given by Radek Obama's former head teacher, Joanne Hodson. She told the inquiry she was pressured by mental health services to water down the EHCP to minimise the danger posed by Radek Obama because of his ethnicity. Ms Hodson told the inquiry this, and I quote verbatim, "My efforts to include this information in the EHCP were met with hostility by the father and also by mental health services. Miss Steed, who was from CAMS, even went as far as to accuse me of racially stereotyping AR as a black boy with a knife. Nothing could be further from the truth. But in the end, the wording of the EHCP was rewritten in many places." That's the end of her verbatim quote. Madam Deputy Speaker, this contributed to the clear risks being missed. The fixation with ethnic disproportionality is deeply damaging. Ethnicity should never be a consideration. When an agency is taking steps to protect the public, everybody should simply be treated exactly the same. We cannot allow dangerous individuals to avoid detention for public safety simply because of their ethnicity. This tragedy must be a line in the sand. We owe it to the victims, to the survivors, and to their families to learn the lessons from this tragedy and to make sure it never happens again.
Labour's Chagos surrender has been wrong from the start. And instead of making excuses, the right thing to do would have been to tear up this dreadful treaty and commit to keeping Chagos British. And it's the Conservatives who've opposed this Labour deal at every turn. And while Labour has spectacularly failed to defend British sovereignty, and Reform have gone from suggesting that we sell the islands to the US to suggesting that we give it to the Maldives, the Conservative Party has been effectively scrutinising and opposing this surrender every step of the way to make sure that we keep Chagos British and we protect our sovereignty and our taxpayers.
The process for negotiating this treaty has been, I'm sorry to say, utterly shambolic. From its beginning under the previous government to its demise under this one. As the government shells a gallant gentleman from a sedentary position says, why did we finish it? I'm sorry to tell him they didn't. There is no evidence at all. There is no evidence at all that this statement was finished by the previous government. The most objectionable aspect of this process has been the woeful engagement with the Chagossian community. The British state has long denied Chagossians a meaningful say in their own future, and the provisions of this treaty shamefully failed again.
Lord Robertson, who authored the government's Strategic Defence Review, has said the Prime Minister has a corrosive complacency when it comes to defence. Why did he say that?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, let me start by saying I respect Lord Robertson, and I thank him again. I thank him again for carrying out the strategic review. My responsibility is to keep the British people safe, and that is a duty I take seriously. That is why I don't agree with his comments.
Mr. Speaker, he says he doesn't agree with Lord Robertson. Lord Robertson is a former Labour Defence Secretary, a former NATO Secretary General. He also said, and I quote, "We are underprepared, we are underinsured, we are under attack." He said...
Order. Sorry? Yeah. I don't think it looks good, shouting somebody down at the dispatch box.
Talking about an increase is not the same as giving an increase. The military and the defence industry want to hear about what he's going to do, not him prosecuting past governments. He promised the Defence Investment Plan would be published last autumn. I asked him at PMQs 6 weeks ago when it would be published. He had no idea. It is now the middle of April. What's the hold-up?
Mr. Speaker, I've set out my position. The Defence Investment Plan is the first line-by-line review of defence budgets for 18 years. She talks about talking. If you're going to support and make your country safe, you have to get the right calls on the big issues. She called for us to jump into the war. When I said we should jump into the war, she said this weekend, Mr. Speaker, that what she meant, she was talking about verbal support.
Prime Minister, it's Prime Minister's questions. We've got to concentrate.
My constituents are working themselves to the bone. And let's be absolutely clear, they are working and still having to claim benefits. There's not a single section of society, whether it's farmers, care workers, students, you name it, they have been let down. And I don't want that to be the case. We need to show that this House works for them. Will this government now change economic and fiscal course and deliver for people in the worst cost of living crisis?
Welfare spending is set to rise by another £70 billion by 2030. And the last time I asked the Prime Minister about this, he said he was mending the system. Well, since then, Mr. Speaker, this disastrous Labour government have raised taxes on working people to give even more to those who don't. The people I speak to across Broxbourne think that this Labour government are taking them for mugs. So what does the Prime Minister say to working people across this United Kingdom who are being asked to pay more and are getting less?
I'll tell them they were let down very badly by the last government for 14 years, and we're clearing up the mess.
How many more businesses need to close, jobs be lost, and apprenticeship opportunities trashed need to happen before this Prime Minister understands that the practical outturn of his policies aren't working?
Well, I'm concerned here of those examples. We have put in place support for small businesses, and I'll make sure that's available to him to pass on to his constituents.
Does the Minister accept and agree with the mood of the majority of the British people, and I think the mood of this House, which is to accelerate defence spending to 3% of GDP in this Parliament, not next Parliament? And can the Minister confirm that the year-long delayed defence investment plan will arrive before the summer holidays?
Mr. Speaker, perhaps if the honourable gentleman would like to give some of the money that his former Reform leader in Wales got from Russia to the defence budget, we'd have a wee bit more than we have today.
There is not a serious professional in the defence industry that thinks the current spending is adequate to meet the world's needs. Does the Minister think it's a serious investment that we're currently making at the moment?
He's right that we need to increase defence spending. I want to increase defence spending. We have already increased defence spending, and by April 2027 we'll be spending 2.5% of GDP, 3% in the next Parliament. But I entirely appreciate how the honourable gentleman is making his remarks. I'm very happy talking to him. I'm sure the Minister for Veterans next door about his own experience, see if we can learn and help others in a similar situation.
I have every sympathy with patriotic defence ministers who are being sent out to try to put a brave face on the fact that they are being undermined by their own Chancellor of the Exchequer. Isn't it a fact that someone as collegiate, experienced and patriotic as Lord Robertson would never have spoken out in the way that he has done if he did not recognise that the defence team, his party's defence team, are being undermined in this way?
May I say, it's deeply unedifying to hear both the Minister and others playing political games with the matter of national security. Look, we can all look at the past. I can tell you about the body armour that I had to give over to somebody else for the invasion of Iraq because we didn't have enough in 2003. I can point to the underfunding of helicopters that meant that friends of mine were killed on operations in Afghanistan because they were underfunded under governments before his, but yes, wearing the same colour tie. We can all point to the past. The question for him is not what happened in the past, but what are you going to do about it in the future? The Defence Investment Plan, the Minister says, is not urgently needed because he's spending anyway. Well, why is he wasting his time in producing the damn thing? He could spare those civil servants to actually get contracts delivered instead of messing around with games, or actually put his heart behind the fight with the Treasury that needs to be had right now, as his own friend Lord Robertson has already made clear.
What you've just seen captures a week that many in Westminster will not forget anytime soon. The Commons wasn't just loud. It was raw, emotional and deeply divided. From questions over national security and economic stability to the heartbreaking findings of the Southport inquiry, the pressure on leadership has intensified in a way that's hard to ignore. For ordinary people watching, these debates aren't just political arguments. They reflect real fears about safety, rising costs, and whether the system is truly working for them. When trust begins to slip, every unanswered question feels heavier, every delay more frustrating, and every controversy more damaging. The growing scrutiny around decisions, appointments and accountability shows just how fragile political authority can become under sustained pressure. And as elections approach, moments like this could shape public opinion in ways that last far beyond a single week. The big question now is simple. Will this pressure force change, or will it deepen the crisis even further? If you want to stay ahead of every major development in UK politics, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the stories that matter most.